He never expected that saving a stranger's life would cost him everything he had left. One moment, a poor black farmer was fighting flames to pull an unconscious man from a burning car. The next, his only source of income, his entire cornfield, was gone, and the people who were supposed to help him turned their backs like his loss didn't matter. While smoke was still rising from the ashes, the whispers began, rumors, blame, and judgments no one bothered to question. But 3 days later, when 10 black SUVs tore down his dirt road, the truth he'd been forced to swallow shattered in an instant. What were they really coming for, and why now? Before everything fell apart, Marcus Hill's life was simple but heavy. Every morning before dawn, the poor black farmer stepped onto the same stretch of Kansas soil he'd worked since he was a teenager, carrying the weight of bills, expectations, and a future he was barely holding together. His cornfield wasn't just land, it was his lifeline, the one thing standing between his daughter's dreams and the reality that had chased their family for generations. Marcus didn't complain. He didn't have time to. With his wife gone, cancer taking her faster than they could pay the doctors, he focused on what he had left. His daughter, Alicia, a brilliant girl who'd earned her place at a top university through grit and late nights. Marcus had promised her she'd go, no matter what it cost him. But even before the fire, the threats were already closing in. The bank notices, the interest payments, the quiet looks from neighbors who thought they understood his life better than he did. Out here, being a black man meant always proving yourself twice and getting half the benefit of the doubt. Marcus felt it every time he walked into a bank. Every time someone questioned whether a man like him could really run a farm this size on his own. Still, he pushed through each day with stubborn hope, praying nothing catastrophic would happen before harvest. He couldn't afford surprises. Not now, not ever. But life doesn't wait for the right moment to break you. And on a scorching afternoon, as Marcus knelt beside an aging irrigation pump thinking about nothing more than surviving the next month, he heard a sound that made his heart seize in his chest. Something was coming, something that would change everything. Marcus didn't think. He ran through the rows of corn, across the dry earth that cracked beneath his boots, toward the sound that had sliced through the quiet. When he broke through the final row, he saw it. A red sports car crushed into the edge of his field, smoke pouring from the hood, flames licking upward like hungry fingers, and inside, slumped over the wheel, was a stranger. Marcus didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate the cost. He didn't think of the bills stacked on the kitchen table or the mortgage hanging over him like a storm cloud. He grabbed a rock, shattered the window, and dragged the unconscious man out just seconds before the car exploded behind them. The blast knocked him forward, but Marcus shielded the stranger with his own body, feeling the heat scorch his back. And then he saw it, the fire spreading. Fast. Too fast. Within minutes, the blaze swallowed row after row of dry corn, racing across the field that held his entire future. His harvest, his mortgage payment, his daughter's tuition, everything he had left. By the time the firefighters arrived, the damage was done. A third of the field gone. And as the smoke drifted across the property, Marcus felt something colder than fear settle in his chest. He knew what this meant. He knew exactly how people would talk, how quickly blame would shift toward him, how little sympathy a poor black farmer could expect in this town. And he was right. The next morning, word spread faster than the flames ever had. Neighbors whispered that it must have been Marcus's fault, that he wasn't maintaining his equipment properly, that something like this was bound to happen eventually. Not one person mentioned the life he saved. When the insurance adjuster arrived, he barely stepped out of his car. He didn't even look Marcus in the eye, just flipped through papers, took a half-hearted glance at the field, and muttered something about pre-existing negligence before leaving as quickly as he came. It didn't matter that Marcus had saved a man's life. All that mattered was the story they'd already told themselves about a black farmer who they assumed didn't know what he was doing. But the worst blow came that afternoon. The bank truck pulled up. 2 men stepped out, clean shirts, polished shoes, and expressions that said they had already decided the outcome before they walked onto Marcus's land. They handed him a notice. Foreclosure proceedings starting immediately. No extension. No consideration. No mercy. As if saving a life had been a mistake he now needed to pay for. Marcus stood there, the paper trembling in his hands, fighting the sting of humiliation burning in his chest. He tried to explain. They didn't listen. They didn't care. To them, he wasn't a hero. He wasn't a man who had sacrificed everything in one selfless act. He was just another black farmer falling behind exactly what they expected. And when he turned around to ask the stranger for help, or even an explanation, he found the guest room empty. The man Nathan was gone. No note, no goodbye. Just silence. But 3 days later, as Marcus tried to salvage what was left of his life, the quiet was shattered. 10 black SUVs roared down his dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust, engines growling like thunder. Marcus froze, because whatever was coming next was bigger than the fire, bigger than the debt, bigger than the lies. And it wasn't stopping. The engines cut off all at once. 10 black SUVs sat in a perfect line across Marcus's yard, silent and unmoving, like a wall closing in. For a heartbeat, the world didn't make a sound. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then the doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out, too coordinated, too deliberate to be anything ordinary. Marcus felt his pulse spike. He'd seen this before in small towns like his. Powerful people showing up unannounced. And folks like him always paid the price. After everything he'd just lost, the last thing he needed was another fight he couldn't win. One man stepped forward, tall, composed, eyes sharp enough to slice through the tension. He said Marcus's name without asking for it. And the moment he did, every instinct Marcus had screamed danger. He braced himself for another accusation, another notice, another punishment for something he didn't do. But then the back door of the lead SUV opened, and Nathan stepped out. Not bruised, not confused, not helpless. Different. The man standing there wasn't the injured stranger Marcus had dragged from a burning car. He was someone whose presence carried weight, someone used to commanding rooms, not crashing in fields. And behind him, emerging from the vehicles, were people whose faces Marcus recognized from newspaper headlines and TV interviews. People with influence, people with money, people who didn't show up anywhere without a reason. Nathan walked toward Marcus with a look Marcus couldn't read, part remorse, part something heavier, something that made the men in suits stand straighter. The truth hit Marcus like a blow. This wasn't some accidental visitor. This wasn't some ordinary man in trouble. He had saved someone whose life echoed far beyond Kansas soil. And now, they were here because of it. Nathan opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, one of the suited men stepped forward and placed a folder in Marcus's hands. Thick, heavy, official. Marcus felt the weight of it before he even looked down. Whatever was inside was about to change everything he thought he knew about the man he saved, and the price he was about to pay or be repaid for that choice. The next moment would decide which one. Marcus opened the folder with hands that still shook from the shock of everything unfolding around him. Inside were documents he never expected to see, proof that Nathan Cole wasn't just a stranger, but the heir to one of the largest philanthropic networks in the country. But what stopped Marcus cold wasn't the name. It was the apology written in a trembling hand. Nathan had left the house not to escape, but to bring back the people who could actually make this right. People who never would have believed what happened, unless they saw the damage with their own eyes. One by one, they stepped forward. The bank was overruled, the foreclosure papers voided, the debts erased. And in an act that stunned even Marcus into silence, the group announced they would rebuild every acre of the cornfield he lost and fund Alicia's entire education in full. Not as charity, not as pity, but as restitution for a system that never should have failed him in the first place. But even as relief washed over him, Marcus knew that moments like this, miracles wrapped in justice, were rare. Too rare. For every story that ends with SUVs and signatures, there are countless others that end quietly, unfairly, painfully, with no audience, no rescue, no recognition. Marcus stood in his yard, surrounded by powerful men who finally listened, and he felt the weight of all the stories that never reached this moment. His life was changed, yes, his future restored. But the truth that lingered in his chest was far bigger than him, because this wasn't just about a fire in a cornfield. It was about the fires people like him have been forced to put out their entire lives, fires they didn't start,